Raise your hand if you actually want mental illness. Yeah, I didn't think so. Healing is very, very, very difficult. It's very hard. We, as survivors, have spent most of our lives trying to repress every single memory that we had of our abuse. And then we seek out someone on purpose to go in and rehash all of those bad memories so that we can live a more functional life. I haven't met one person who basically said, man, I wish I had a mental illness. Now, I have had people say, man, I bet it's cool having MPD. I bet that's cool having alters. And whereas I can see the fascination behind having this disorder, getting it was something I barely lived through. Don't get me wrong, I want them here now. I have learned to live with them, and I have learned to become friends with them, and they are now mine. I can claim them. They are mine. But it's always interesting to run into people or to see someone's reaction to another person with mental illness. When I first met Melissa, she had an academic understanding of mental illness. She didn't really see it firsthand, and she didn't really have it in her life until she met me. But slowly through the years, she has begun to be more sympathetic towards it. She will never be empathetic because she doesn't have a mental illness. No one in her family has a mental illness. Her family's pretty well put together. She does have one person in her life who has slight OCD, but it's manageable. It doesn't stop their life. It always fascinates me when I run into someone who's never had experience with someone with mental illness. I'm going to say it, and it's going to be okay. I watched seasons 1, 2, and 3 of Glee. I wasn't very happy with season 4, so I stopped watching. But season 3 was probably my favorite of the entire series, because they did something that very few shows talk about on TV. Glee and Fringe are probably the two that really, really talk about it, about mental illness. And one of the things that they talked about in Glee, spoiler alert, okay, if you haven't watched season 3 of Glee, mute this next section. There was one scene, and it made me cry. And I watched it 3 or 4 different times, just because that scene was so powerful, and it made me cry. It was a scene where Will had invited Emma's parents over for dinner, and it was never a secret during the whole series that Emma has OCD, and she has a pretty severe case of OCD. And when her parents came over and they had dinner, their presence just exacerbated her OCD. It just made it so much worse. But Will thought that it would be okay. As they kept picking on her, as her parents kept picking on her and picking on her and picking on her about these little things that she was doing at the table, as it was getting worse and worse and worse, finally she left the room. And Will snapped at her parents for treating her that way. So the scene I'm talking about that really, 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 really got to me was the next scene where she's sitting in the bed and she's wringing her hands an X number of times and she's counting. And this is an action. This is one action. Every OCD person has something different that they do to calm them, to bring them back into control over the situation. And she had to do this. She knew in her mind, in her logical mind, that this wasn't going to solve anything. But in her mental illness mind, this was solving everything. She knew that she had to do it. She knew she couldn't stop doing it. And she knew that it wasn't going to fix anything. So when Will came and sat down next to her, and she was counting, and she was rocking, and she was counting, he interrupted her. And that upset her. And she was trying to explain to him what it was like. And although he wanted to understand, there was no way that he was going to be able to really empathize. I read a lot of recaps on After Ellen, and there was a recap of that scene. And the song that he sang, the song that Will sang, was Fix You by Fun. And she called it one of the most codependent scenes on TV she had ever seen, or close to that. And I was truly, truly, truly insulted, because the scene that I saw as a person with mental illness, the scene that I witnessed, was a person who loved someone with mental illness so much that if he could snap his fingers and make it all better, he would. And that was the point of that song. That was the point, in my mind, that was the point of that whole scene. He saw her suffering. He saw her in pain. And when you love someone that much, that's the very last thing that you want to see, is for them to be in that much pain. So why am I talking about that today? A friend of mine had a very bad trigger moment last night. And what's interesting is that she knew that she wasn't being logical. She knew what caused the trigger, and she knew that her reaction was not logical. And one of the things that helps her is to immediately start talking about something else that requires a lot of thought. And I know this. I know what helps her. And I stayed up well past my bedtime so that I could help her. And my only thought was, I wish the statement that I made was, I'm going to save everyone from this place. I promise. We have plans for me and Melissa, my friend and her mother, to move to Oregon fairly soon, by the end of the summer for sure. And I did exactly what he did, what Will did, is I made this declaration and I made this promise. I don't know if I can pull it off, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to save her, because I don't want my friend to hurt anymore. So my question is, Do you think that's codependency? Or do you think it's just trying to keep somebody that you love from being in that much pain? I know my answer. My answer is it's just saving somebody from pain. I think that mental health professionals try very hard to diagnose people with as many things as they can. I still don't think that it's a bad thing to want to help somebody. Because I know I don't want to have mental illness. I know. And my friend doesn't. And there's nothing that we can really do to stop it, except continue to have our journey of healing, to keep moving forward, to understand what our triggers are, and to keep moving forward. Healing is hard. Being in therapy is hard. But it's necessary.